You're standing in a room full of people laughing, and you can hear every note of their joy. But it sounds like it's coming from behind glass. You're nodding, smiling, performing the choreography of belonging. But there's this quiet hum in your chest, a frequency no one else seems to hear. The thought arrives, as it always does, uninvited and certain. I don't belong here. Not because they're cruel, not because you're unwanted, but because there's something fundamentally wrong with the way you exist in spaces that others seem to inhabit so easily. You've felt this everywhere. In your family's living room during holiday dinners, where everyone else seemed to speak a language you only half understood. In classrooms where other kids formed alliances with an ease that baffled you. In relationships where your partner looked at you with love, and you felt like an imposter receiving affection meant for someone else. At parties, in meetings, in quiet coffee shops, in your own bed at 3 a.m. The feeling follows you like a shadow you can't outrun. And here's what makes this so devastating. You've become exceptionally good at reading rooms. You can sense the emotional temperature of a space within seconds. You know when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. You can feel the shift in energy when you enter. You've developed a kind of social hyper-awareness that borders on clairvoyance, and it's exactly this gift that keeps you locked outside. This is the core paradox of ontological displacement. The very sensitivity that makes you aware you don't fit is the same mechanism that ensures you never will. You became so good at observing that you forgot how to participate. You learned to monitor yourself so carefully that you can no longer be yourself. The survival skill that helped you navigate a world that felt hostile has become the cage that keeps you separate. You are living in what I call perpetual self-exile, a psychological state where home isn't a place you left, but a feeling you've never had. Let's establish what we're really talking about here, because this isn't shyness, it isn't introversion, it isn't social anxiety, though it often wears that mask. What we're examining is a fundamental disruption in what developmental psychologists call social ontology, your basic sense of having a legitimate place in the human world. The psychologist D.W. Winnicott described something he called going on being, the natural, unconsidered sense that you have a right to exist and take up space. For people who always feel out of place, this going on being was interrupted early. Somewhere in your developmental years, you received the message, subtle or overt, that your authentic self was somehow wrong, too much, or not enough. Maybe your emotional needs overwhelmed a depressed parent. Maybe your natural enthusiasm was met with irritation instead of delight. Maybe you were parentified, forced to become the emotional regulator in a chaotic household, and learned that your role was to disappear into usefulness. What happens neurologically is profound. Your brain's default mode network, the system responsible for self-referential thinking and your sense of continuous identity, becomes hijacked by what's called hypervigilant self-monitoring. Instead of your DMN creating a stable, coherent sense of I am, it becomes a surveillance system constantly asking, am I acceptable right now? Am I doing this right? Do I belong? This creates what attachment theorists identify as a disorganized attachment pattern to reality itself. You want to connect, but connection feels dangerous. You crave belonging, but belonging requires vulnerability. And vulnerability was what got you hurt in the first place. So you develop what I call the observer's position. You learn to hover just outside every experience, watching yourself live rather than actually living. Think of it like this. Imagine everyone else is swimming in the ocean of human experience, and you're in a glass-bottomed boat above them. You can see everything. You can study the patterns, understand the currents, analyze the ecosystem, but you're not wet. You're not buoyant. You're not held by the water. You're separate, watching, always watching. And that separation feels both like safety and like the deepest loneliness imaginable. The philosophical weight of this cannot be overstated. The existentialist Martin Buber wrote about two fundamental ways of relating to the world: I, thou, and I, it. In I, thou, you meet reality and other people as subjects, whole, present, mutual. In I-IT, you turn everything into an object to be analyzed, managed, understood. People who always feel out of place get trapped in permanent I-IT mode. You can't have I-thou connection with a world you're constantly studying for threats. The emotional cost of this perpetual displacement is something I need you to really sit with, because it's where the true tragedy lives. You are grieving a home you've never had, not a physical home, though often that too, but the felt sense of being at home in your own existence. This is what philosophers call ontological homelessness, and it's one of the most profound forms of suffering because it can't be solved by changing locations or relationships. You carry the exile inside you. Every moment of potential joy is contaminated by self-consciousness. You can't laugh freely without hearing your own laugh. You can't speak without editing. You can't rest without monitoring whether you're resting correctly. The very act of being becomes a performance you're simultaneously starring in and critiquing. And here's the invisible grief that no one talks about. You're tired. Not physically tired, though often that too, but tired in your soul. Tired from the constant vigilance. Tired from managing everyone's comfort. Tired from trying to reverse engineer belonging by becoming whatever you think others need. Tired from living as a sociological study of humanity rather than a member of it. Carl Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." For you, the terror is doubled, because you don't even know what your complete self looks like. You've been performing adaptive personas for so long that your authentic self feels like a stranger. Who are you when you're not adjusting? What do you actually want when you're not calibrating to others' needs? What does your real voice sound like when it's not modulated for acceptance? The cruelest part is that your perpetual outsider status makes you exceptionally perceptive about human nature. You see patterns others miss. You understand motivations that remain opaque to the well-adjusted. Your exile has made you wise. But wisdom purchased through chronic disconnection is a bitter gift. You have insights about the human condition that you can't fully share, because sharing them would require the very belonging you lack. This is the fear that drives everything. If I stop monitoring, if I stop adapting, if I show up as I actually am, I will be rejected. And that rejection won't just be painful. It will confirm the terrible suspicion I've carried since childhood, that there's something fundamentally unlovable about my unmodified self. So you keep your real self sealed away, like a specimen in formaldehyde, preserved, protected, but never alive. Let me show you how this shows up in your adult life, because recognition is the first step toward liberation. You might find yourself in relationships where you're deeply loved, and you feel like a fraud. Your partner adores you, but you know they're adoring the curated version you present. You're terrified that if they saw the unedited you, the messy thoughts, the strange obsessions, the parts you've learned to hide, they'd leave. So you maintain the performance even in intimacy, which means you're lonely even when held. You might become an adult who is extraordinarily competent at work, but secretly believes you're faking it all. You've learned to study what success looks like in any context and replicate it flawlessly. But there's no joy in achievement because you feel like you're puppeteering yourself through someone else's life. You receive praise and it bounces off you like rain on glass because deep down you believe they're praising the mask, not the person. You might notice that you're most comfortable in liminal spaces, airports, late-night diners, the edges of gatherings, transition periods in life. These places match your internal state. You're most at home when the context itself is homeless, when everyone's supposed to be between places, because then your outsider status is appropriate rather than aberrant. You might find yourself compulsively oversharing or completely closed off with no middle ground. Either you're dumping your entire psychological history on someone to test if they'll stay, or you're maintaining such rigid boundaries that no one can get close. Both strategies are attempts to solve the same problem. If I control the terms of revelation, I control the timing of the inevitable rejection. You might realize that you only feel fully yourself when alone, and even then, you're not sure who that self is. Solitude becomes both refuge and prison. It's the only place you're not performing, but it's also where the loneliness becomes deafening. You crave connection and recoil from it in equal measure, trapped in an approach avoidance dance that exhausts everyone involved, especially you. You might become addicted to intensity, dramatic relationships, crisis situations, extreme experiences, because those are the only times you feel real. When everything's on fire, there's no time for self-consciousness. You're forced into presence by emergency. But when life calms down, the familiar dissociation returns, and you might unconsciously create drama just to feel embodied again. You might notice that you're drawn to other outsiders, creating beautiful, broken communities of the displaced, and yet, even there, you feel out of place. You find your people, the other misfits, and still you're the misfit among misfits. There's a part of you that believes if you truly belonged anywhere, it would invalidate the entire identity you've built around not belonging. You might find that you're exceptional in empathy, but terrible at receiving it. You can hold space for others' pain with a capacity that borders on supernatural, but when someone tries to comfort you, your system rejects it. You've learned to be the helper, the witness, the supporter, never the helped, the witnessed, the supported. Being cared for triggers shame because it requires admitting you have needs, and needs made you burdensome once. Here's what you need to understand. These aren't personality traits. These are adaptive coping strategies from a nervous system that learned the world is unsafe. This is not who you are. This is who you had to become to survive an environment that couldn't hold all of you. The crucial step isn't to gaslight yourself into just fitting in. It's to witness the wound, to look at that child who learned to become invisible, who learned to read rooms instead of relax in them, who learned that authenticity was dangerous, and to finally acknowledge that was real, that happened. And it makes perfect sense that you developed these strategies. So what does healing look like when you've been exiled from your own life? It begins with something that might feel impossible, choosing to be seen anyway. Not performing to be accepted, but allowing yourself to be witnessed in your unedited state and discovering that the world doesn't end. This is where practices like internal family systems therapy become transformative. You begin to recognize that the observer, the part of you that's always watching, always monitoring, isn't your enemy. It's a protector part that's been working overtime. You don't need to eliminate it. You need to thank it for its service and gently help it understand that the emergency is over. You're not that unsafe child anymore. Inner child reparenting isn't Instagram aesthetics. It's the serious work of going back to the moments when you learned you didn't belong and offering your younger self what wasn't available then: unconditional acceptance. You learn to become the adult who tells that child, you were never the problem. The environment was, and I'm not leaving you. Shadow work requires you to reclaim the parts of yourself you exiled to gain acceptance. The anger you suppressed to be agreeable, the weirdness you hid to seem normal, the neediness you buried to appear strong. These rejected aspects don't disappear. They run your life from the basement of your unconscious. Integration means bringing them into the light and discovering they're not as monstrous as you feared. But perhaps the most radical practice is what I call choosing softness. For so long, you've been armored, vigilant, prepared for rejection. Softness means allowing yourself to be clumsy at connection, to try and fail, to show up authentically and maybe not be everyone's cup of tea, and to survive that without letting it confirm your worst fears. You practice by taking micro risks, sharing one true thing instead of a curated thing, letting someone see you cry, asking for help without apologizing for needing it, staying present in a moment of joy instead of immediately analyzing it. Each small act of presence is rebellion against the exile. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are. The most insidious form of despair is choosing to be someone else." You have been living in this insidious despair, choosing to be the person you think will fit rather than the person you are. Healing is the slow, courageous act of closing that gap. And here's what you'll discover that might shock you. Your sense of not fitting isn't a flaw in you. It's proof that you are paying attention. The world, as it's currently constructed, is often alienating, performative, and hostile to authenticity. Your discomfort isn't pathology, it's perception. You don't feel at home because many of the spaces you've been in weren't built for genuine human connection. This means belonging isn't about finally becoming acceptable to spaces that reject depth. It's about finding or creating spaces, relationships, communities, contexts that celebrate the very qualities you've been taught to hide. It's about discovering that there are people who don't want the performed version, who are actually bored by it, who are desperately hoping you'll drop the mask so they can drop theirs too. You are not broken. You are not too much or not enough. You are a person with a highly sensitive system that learned to protect itself through vigilance and withdrawal. And now, with awareness and practice, you can teach that system a new truth, that you can survive being seen. That belonging isn't something you earn through perfection, it's something you claim through presence. The goal isn't to fix yourself. The goal is to become whole by integrating all the parts you've scattered in the pursuit of acceptance. To gather the exile and bring them home, not to a place, but to your own embodied existence. If this resonated with you, if you've been living as a stranger in your own life, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden psychology that shapes our pain and our path forward. You've been searching for the place you belong. Maybe the truth is simpler and more profound. You belong in your own skin, in this moment, exactly as you are. And that belonging isn't waiting to be earned. It's waiting to be remembered. Welcome home.